Hello and welcome to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. My name is Eric Herlock. Today I'm sitting in an RV park in Carrollton, Kentucky. Today is Wednesday, July 7th, and we've been on the road now for a week. We left Pennsylvania and we headed to Assateague Island to see the ocean once more before we headed inland. We camped at Assateague State Park and rolled in after 10 p.m. The stars were vast and innumerable, and my kids saw the Milky Way for the first time. We woke up early on July 1st, watched the sunrise over the ponies that were horsing around on the beach. I took a quick dip in the ocean, and we got on the road, planning to be in Burlington, North Carolina by 2 p.m. So what's that old joke? How do you make God laugh? You have a plan. We blew a tire on the interstate outside of Durham, North Carolina, and after 5 hours of waiting for the roadside assistance, a guy in a minivan showed up with a 3-ton jack for our 14,000-pound RV, which, by the way, my wife has named Dolly. Well, obviously that jack couldn't do the job, so we got a room at a nearby hotel and waited for roadside assistance to help out in the morning. And it turns out that all 6 of our tires were dangerously cracked and worn, and if we didn't get them all replaced, we'd be dealing with a very dangerous situation. But thanks to the grace of God and a guy named Chad at Piedmont Truck Tires in Raleigh, we were back on the road with a new set of shoes for Dolly. But that whole mess really messed us up, and we missed what were going to be the first and second stops on our tour. First at TS Designs in Burlington, where Eric Henry is developing the supply chain and reestablishing the textile industry in the Carolinas with an initiative he calls Dirt to Shirt. I was able to interview him over Zoom from the hotel conference room in Durham, and I will publish that interview soon. The second stop on the tour was supposed to be at Gary Sykes' farm in Polkton, North Carolina. But by the time Dolly got reshod, it was 5 p.m. and we were scheduled to be at our campsite in Lake Powhatan, just south of Asheville, about 5 hours away. We rolled into the campsite by 11 and were greeted by my old friend Steve Batten and his wife Susan. I hadn't seen them in 15 years, but we had coordinated to meet here at the campsite. So we spent all day Saturday, July 3rd, in the woods, hiking, swimming in Lake Powhatan, eating food, and enjoying the company of old friends. Sunday morning, we went to Sliding Rock, a little further south, where you can slide down a waterfall on the Looking Glass Creek. And then we pushed on into Tennessee. And we got to Dollywood in time for some roller coasters, some lemonade, and fireworks. We had hoped to find a Dolly Parton bobblehead doll for the dashboard of the RV, but Dolly Parton's humility and love shone through at Dollywood, and this beautiful amusement park has none of the gaudy icons of Dolly Parton that you might expect. Early morning, we drove from Kings Holly Haven RV Park in Pigeon Forge and pushed across Tennessee and landed in Murray, Kentucky at the home of HempWood, where we caught up with Greg Wilson, founder and CEO of HempWood, along with the Dean of Hemp, Dr. Tony Brannon, from Murray State University. So we'll take a quick sponsor message here, and then we'll get into these interviews with Greg Wilson and Dr. Brannon. And there's also a short interview with Tommy Copeland, the operations manager at HempWood. So here we go. This episode of the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast is brought to you by New Holland Agriculture and the National Hemp Association. Hemp, the next frontier in agriculture, is here, and New Holland is ready to help you grow, harvest, and process it. They're partnering with researchers, engineers, and farmers to continue to move the industry forward. They've allied with the National Hemp Association to swiftly return hemp crops onto farmland. They're working hard to solve the unique challenges of hemp production. With decades of innovation in agriculture, New Holland can help you capitalize on this new frontier. Now that's the pioneering spirit. Get a head start in growing, harvesting, and profiting from hemp. Visit betterhempharvest.com. I'd also like to give a shout out to IND Hemp. Without their help, this trip wouldn't be happening. And also a shout out to King's Agri Seeds, Pterodon Hemp, Amerishona Cast Hemp, Rose Downs, and of course the National Hemp Association and New Holland Agriculture. Thank you for your support. Alright, so driving into Murray, I didn't know what to expect. But we pulled into the lot and there was just sort of an unassuming building, sort of a pole barn with lots of bales of hemp all around it. And I went in and I met Greg, and he gave me a tour of the place. It was July 5th, so his employees were all off for the July 4th holiday, so it was quiet, and yeah, it was pretty neat. So let's get into these interviews. Here we go. All right, I'm here with Greg Wilson at HempWood out here in Murray, Kentucky. This is was going to be our third stop on our hemp tour, but because of the tire situation in North Carolina, this is our first stop. So, Greg, thanks for having me out here. It's nice to meet you in person. And could you give us an introduction?
Yeah, sure. Well, first, thanks for stopping by. Murray, Kentucky is a beautiful little place in western Kentucky. And so you got land between the lakes here. You've got the university here. And it makes a really nice place to actually live. I've lived in a lot of different places with my bamboo background and things like that. But it's quiet here. You've got a high education level. And a lot of the problems that have happened globally or in different parts of the U.S. didn't affect this area as much because it's more spread out. I mean, you still had all your problems and things, but where you're spread out a little bit more and things are a little bit slower, you don't got to worry about traffic and everything. It actually just kind of continues to go along. So that did help a lot this past year, just being here in Murray and the university and everything. But yeah, Greg Wilson. I studied engineering. I got into building materials, mainly because I was the second born in my family. So my older brother got to take over the family building company.
Oh, okay.
And so then I had to go out and figure my own out. So I started building factories instead of building houses. But our family, 3 or 4 different generations now, has been building houses and small-scale commercial, as well as a lot of different remodeling and stuff. So I grew up with flooring, and I grew up with hanging drywall and framing and things like that.
And running a business.
Yes. Well, so helping run a business. Okay. Yes. Seeing how it happens. And so I got into flooring mainly because when I wanted to study engineering, my reading and writing weren't great, and my math was pretty good. And so in going into college, they said, do you have a second language? And I'd kind of mucked around in high school learning a second language. I studied French and German and never really stuck with anything. And so I took on learning Chinese as kind of a, I guess when they challenged me with, do you have another language? Your reading and writing is not great. I said, I'll learn Chinese. And China was actually joining the World Trade Organization at that time. So I kind of put 2 and 2 together and said, well, if I want to be an engineer and make stuff and I can learn another language, then it's going to set the bar pretty high for some sort of competition for basically what I wanted to do. So I ended up studying over in China for a year and was actually doing an internship with my mom. She was a guidance counselor for elementary school, and one of the other teachers at her school had a son who had a flooring mill in China. So when I said I want to go to China, then that's actually where I ended up working at while I was over there while I was going to school. Oh. It was what was it called? Blue Crab Trading or Blue Crab Flooring, because I was from Maryland. And so Brent Berry kind of set me up, and then I got involved in bamboo when everyone was trying to figure out how to make bamboo flooring harder for commercial use. So historically, vertical and horizontal bamboo, where they just square off pieces and glue them together, but it has the original density of bamboo, which is pretty light. And so high heels would put dings and dents in it. And so there was a bunch of different people trying to come up with a solution of how to make bamboo flooring harder. And you can either impregnate it with adhesives, you could compress it, or you could, the winner ended up being impregnate it with adhesives and then compress it and bake it together, just like you saw out here in the factory. Yeah. So that would have been 2003. Studying over there, and then came back and graduated 2005 and bought a plane ticket by selling my car and just kind of went back and started getting into bamboo flooring.
And so did you invent that process, or
I was not the lead inventor.
Okay.
My name was on the patents,
nice. Okay.
but I was working underneath of someone named Lee Jianhua, John Lee, and Jimmy Song and I were kind of like the juniors on it. So definitely involved in writing the standard operating procedures, figuring out a lot of the details, but the big picture stuff was already kind of there, if that makes sense.
So you're making bamboo flooring in China.
Correct.
And now you're making hemp flooring in Kentucky. Connect the dots for me.
There's a couple more dots in there. But with bamboo flooring, I ended up being part of the engineering team that was setting up the new facilities. So writing the standard operating procedures and then figuring out whenever the commercial side said, we need to grow the volume, we need to grow the production, then me and my team of engineers would go in and set up new facilities, just like you see here. And it actually turned out to be 53 bamboo facilities were set up over 14 years with our team working on it and helping just set them up, usually joint ventures or something like that. The Chinese government started beating up the patents because my old boss actually decided to sue the local bamboo association because there was other people making the same products and shipping them out. And so the local bamboo association was actually quasi-government, and it turned out that a foreign company ended up in Beijing in a court case against a local government entity. It didn't go as planned. The patents were technically still intact, but deemed to be a monopoly, and so a license was granted to the people that were infringing on it. And so the boss came back and said to our team, we need to find a new raw material source. And so we set up laboratories just like we have here at Murray State, where you've basically got chemistry and nanotechnology combined together to look at the small particle sizes of the hemp plant here and then figure out what you can do to impregnate it or reinforce it, strengthen it. And eucalyptus came out of that. So strand woven eucalyptus, which you can still find at every Lowe's in the U.S., was the next product that came out of that algorithm that was written that I worked on for my entire professional career now. And then we figured out a way to recycle woods. But none of them really caught on with having their own name, because no one goes in to buy flooring by saying, I want eucalyptus flooring. They want wood flooring. And then that's a subcategory in the wood flooring industry. Whereas bamboo got its own place on the shelf. So hemp had gone through the process and on a small lab scale worked. But it was illegal, so it was kind of just not even thought about. And when the Farm Bill, the original one, happened in 2014, some of the customers, as I was leaving the bamboo company, on good terms and everything, I'm still involved with them, but some of the former customers called and said, hey, tell me about that project that you had before. You used to have a sample on your desk. And so we started looking into it for some of them and seeing if it was going to make sense. And none of the major companies or the large companies were allowed to get involved with it because they all had some sort of publicly traded element or in multiple states, and it was only legal on a state level. So the research started happening in basements and in all these kind of just different places where it couldn't really be 100% above board. Our company is named Fibonacci because we use that in the manufacturing algorithm, but also because you couldn't ship or bank with anything hemp in the title. So working with Murray State here, we got tied in with Murray State when we were working with Oregon State and Murray State at the same time. Oregon State, being a land-grant university, was trying to keep everything quiet that was happening hemp research-wise, whereas Murray State, only abiding by the state laws and being on the forefront of the hemp agriculture at that time, and still is, they just said, come on in and let's see what happens. So there was a whole lot of action happening here, whereas all but 4 other states, something like all but 3 other states, it was still not legal before 2018. And some of them started to tick over, but just being open for business and welcoming to someone trying something new that in the reality was a long shot and still is only a flip of a coin how it's going to turn out. They kind of placed their bets on us. And the university brought us in and introduced us to the town and said, hey, if anyone from the younger generation is interested in ag tech or interested in kind of the future of farming or hemp, the answer is always yes. You can show them around. And you always pay the farmer before you pay yourself. And with those two general rules, then we set up here in Murray, Kentucky.
Cool. Can you describe the process that happens here?
Well, the short side is you take some hemp stalks, stick it in glue, press it into a log. The longer story is we actually take the hemp stalks after the floral material, after the seeds, and after the leaves and the roots are taken off, which is everything that actually falls inside of the programs. Whatever those programs are, they vary nationally and state by state. But where something can be ingested into the body that can have some sort of an effect, basically everything except for the stalk, is removed from our plant. And then it comes in here with the stalks. We break open the cell structure of it. If you know anything about hemp, the hurd is very absorbent, whereas the fiber is very strong. So the key to what we're doing is, how do you break open the cell structure of that hurd inside of there so it can absorb more of our glue, which is reinforcing the cell walls inside of there, while keeping it attached to the fiber that you see right here, because that fiber is just like long fiber that reinforces concrete. So the hurd absorbs the glue, binds it together, and then the fiber keeps it strong.
Okay. I didn't realize you were using both the hurd and the fiber. I thought you were getting rid of the hurd, but no, that's part of your...
Absolutely.
The secret sauce.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, that's the sponge that absorbs the glue.
Okay. Yeah, keep going.
And so we break open the cell structure. We impregnate it with actually the proteins from soy flour. And so just like paper mache was done thousands of years ago with the Romans and everything, well, Cargill helps us out with soy flour that comes in. And that soy flour acts as a bridge in between the hemp hurd and fiber and the cross-linking agent. You have to have additional proteins put in there. So it's soy flour and water and an organic acid and then some dish detergent to keep out mold and insects. So we put the glue inside of it. We have to dry it back out, and we're utilizing all of this different equipment that was either used for a different type of agriculture or manufacturing process, from plywood to tobacco barns to we buy forklifts from just places that have gone out of business, overhead cranes, everything you could think of. We have to dry it out and get it ready for exactly what we want, and there's no off-the-shelf equipment for what we're doing. And so you have to buy, modify, reinvent, rebuild, rework, and it breaks down a lot because hemp fiber being so strong, anything with a rotary on it gets jammed up. Yep.
Can you talk specifically about some of the pieces of equipment you made?
Yeah. So the kind of the beating heart of the process is the press. So the press came from the bamboo industry, which I'd worked in for a while, and we had to modify just about everything on there and get UL involved to do the safety and security and the different electrical standards and things like that. Our first shot did not work, so we got a $500,000 machine in here that the pre-press did not work for hemp. But we had only had one crack at trying to get it to work because we didn't want our counterparts in China, even though Jimmy Song, he's my brother and he's part of our family here. I'm good with him understanding and knowing what we're doing, but we didn't want to take it into the bamboo facilities and have everybody say, hey, here's a new raw material we can put in.
Right.
So we had one try at it. We just, in our bamboo facilities, after the day ended, I said, hey, I got some material out here. I'll pay everybody a day's wages to stick around for 2 hours and let's press a couple blocks. So the pre-press had to get modified and reworked, and that ended up being a big expense, but it was half expected. The other major equipment that's in here is we have a saw that, having a vertical bandsaw, works with physics. And so it pulls the sawdust out and drops it, whereas if you have a horizontal bandsaw, it's good for softwoods, but it heats up the blades because the sawdust gets stuck in there. Those are your two parts that we had to buy off the shelf and modify a little bit.
Okay.
We've got dryers, which the big dryer that we have, it used to be a rail car. And then we bought the used guts from 5 tobacco barns to get 75,000 CFMs of air blowing through there. And then we heat all of the different elements with the ovens and dryers and all that stuff with a bio burner that we bought here in Kentucky. We have an oven that was built out of a 20-foot container that actually has radiators from another tobacco barn, and it's got a large fan on it that we bought out of some old mill that we hooked up that blows air across these radiators, and the radiators pull heat from burning our waste. We've got cranes all over the place. We've got 4 different cranes. We had the toilet paper unroller, which actually uses our round bales. So a bale of hemp, the theory was, and it kind of works, is that it unrolls like a roll of toilet paper because it had to get picked up in a format, and you can unroll it in that same format. So it has this giant arm that comes down and pushes it, and you sync it up with the timing of a plywood crusher. What was a plywood glue applicator now is the crusher for our hemp stalks. So there's all these different things that we kind of we bought the core elements and modified it. And then Charles, who's our plant manager here, he has kind of built all of the pieces that we're missing, all the different equipment in between that makes everything work. Using our waste has been a large swing in our cost every month, as well as resharpening our blades has been an enormous swing. Between those two, you're talking
saving you money.
Yeah, like $10,000 a month.
Wow.
Between reusing blades and using waste instead of having to dump it or throw it somewhere, if you can turn it into energy.
Cool. So let's say that a load of like a bunch of hemp bales come in. Walk me through that. Once they come into the facility, tell me the path to finished product.
Okay, so we get 2 to 4 truckloads of hemp bales during harvest season a day that come in here. Usually get about 33 round bales per truck. You can get somewhere close to 18 tons. I think it's a little bit less if you get square bales coming in. So square bales can come from a farther distance. You only get 12, 13 tons in round bales. So the square bales are more efficient for coming in. It comes in here. It goes into our storage area where they grade it and they make sure there's not too much grass in it. They make sure it's not moldy, different things like that we have in our incoming quality control. And then it comes into our operation where they unwrap the bales for the round bales or pull out the flakes for the square bales. And it goes through a crushing process. Once it goes through the crushing process, it's batched into a weight size, which is usually 12 pounds. And actually 11 pounds now. With the humidity, we have to drop the weight a little bit. It doesn't dry as fast. And so then it gets rolled up like a fruit roll-up in a circle and dunked into glue. Once it sits in the glue for 10 minutes, we pull it out, let it drip dry, and then unroll this mat, essentially, and put that onto these racks that go into our dryers. It usually dries until the next day, whether it's just with a fan going on it or in the dryers. It takes anywhere from 2 to 6 hours. 2 doesn't happen very often. And then it comes out and gets weighed again and batched and put into our press. 85 pounds goes into every 6-foot block. Then those blocks are pressed. So that's usually day 2. Day 1, material handling, glue application, drying. Day 2, pressed into a block, put into the oven, and it's baked overnight. And then on day 3, it comes out of the mold once it's cooled down and gets stacked for 2 weeks. Just like when you've got a log or you got wood, you got to let it dry a little bit. Yep. So it stabilizes there. And then we can cut it into our boards, which go into flooring, furniture, or any of the different home goods and hobby woods that people use it for.
And you can just work with it just like you would regular lumber.
Well, I think JFK said back in the 60s that if you think you can or can't, you're probably right. That definitely applies to HempWood as far as using it in your project. Because if you're determined to make it work, you'll figure out all of the little things that are different, the details that are different than normal wood. Yeah. Usually the first time someone works with it, they mess it up, they sand it down, they get back on it. And the second time it looks good enough for them to be comfortable with it for their own use. And then by the third time, you've got something that is a commercially viable product. And I've seen that for flooring. I've seen that for cabinetry. I've seen that for furniture. A lot of times with the big manufacturers or downstream manufacturers that we try to get into, everyone's set in their ways of doing something. And so they'll say, now you can't use it. It's a piece of crap. It doesn't work. And so I'll actually find out, and the way I've found how to get these companies to use it is, whatever is their core product they're thinking about making out of it, we'll make one here in the shop. I'll take it with me to the presentation and leave it sitting in their office or sitting in the meeting room and be like, hey, you can keep that cabinet. Just let me know when you want to buy some wood, because you guys are the cabinet makers. And if me, just a wood guy, can build a cabinet like that, you guys can probably make a better quality one than us. Right. And that tends to work because it shows that it can be done. So there's no, it's not going to happen. It's not going to work. Because a big problem you have in corporations or companies where it's not family owned, it's got a big structure, is you're not rewarded for things that you do outside of the bubble. You're not rewarded for improvements that you make, but you are reprimanded for mistakes. And so people typically don't like to go out on a limb and try new stuff because they get no personal benefit. But if it goes wrong, then they get in trouble. And so proving that it can already be done gets you half of the way there.
Right. Cool. Talk to me about how you work with farmers. Do you have contracted farmers, or where do you get your supply?
Oh, I got Tommy handles all that. So, Tommy can sit down and explain a little bit more, but he works closely with Murray State's Department of Agriculture. They're kind of our guardian and our protector and our brains behind what's happening here, because they've got a whole bunch of PhDs on campus there. And so when we have a problem that we can't afford to have that person full-time in-house, we kick over the idea to the university, and they have the Center for Agricultural Hemp, which we were one of the founding members of. And so it kind of pools the brain trust of a university to be able to answer the farming side of it. Mm-hmm. I mean, the biggest problem with farming, from what I'm gathering, and I've only lived on a farm for 1 year now, is that it's not the difficulty of doing it, but it's the variables that come along as you're doing it.
Weather, soil, things like that.
Yes. Yeah. Seeds, and it's outdoors.
Yeah.
And so that not being my strong point, we decided to align directly with the university and the school, the ag school. So
what's in it for them other than, getting their PhDs to think about stuff? And are they making money from your business? Are they financially tied in with you?
So yes, we do make donations to the Center for Agricultural Hemp, which then do pay for the cost that come out of it for the most part. I'm sure it doesn't pencil out completely, but I can also say that the university brings their classes here. We've had, this past week, we had the summer chemistry class in here, and they were actually, I put them to work for 3 days straight, and they brought a notebook. I said, all right, what you're going to do is you're going to go, each day you're going to be in a different workstation here between material prep, block pressing, and then flooring mill. And you're going to write down all the different variables that science is supposed to have the answer for. And then the rest of their summer class is actually taking those 10, 15, 20 questions and trying to find as many answers for it. So it's actually applying what they're doing in the lab, saying, hey, if the moisture content of the hemp before it goes into the glue is above a certain level, how much less glue does it absorb? Or if the temperature outside and humidity outside is high enough, then how can we get the chemistry of the glue to cure at a higher temperature so we can dry at a higher temperature? Because you've got the two stages, you're drying and then you're curing, that happen. But if you go over a certain temperature in that drying, your glue starts to set off, the chemistry in it. So, I mean, we've got the OSHA program where they come in and literally make us OSHA compliant as part of their classes. The ag students, we just hired 3 full-time salaried employees that were my interns last year, on top of Tommy from the year before. And we've got our new round of interns. So literally between a third and 40% of our workforce came from Murray State.
Okay.
So this is where people are coming as interns and graduating into salary jobs. Engineering departments all over it too. We always have an engineering intern in here, and we have Dr. Hildebrandt who's helping with that. We've got Dr. Miller from the chemistry department who's in here doing that. We've got Dean Brannon and then Dr. Parr from the ag school that are all over it, and Dr. Ferguson who's doing all these different trials and these different crazy ideas where we're trying to figure out how to conduct electricity through HempWood. We've got some patents on it. We've got some different ideas with it, but that takes real science, not just engineering, to make it work. And so throwing all of these different projects that show your hands-on applications of industry into your different sectors is where I see the university benefiting from it.
Sure.
And always having just the younger generation come out, and Dr. Brannon can tell you that a lot of the younger generation is interested in hemp as an agricultural crop. And it's the same in the woodworking industry, because woodworking is like, I inherited my grandfather's tools. And so with my grandfather's tools, I'd make a little bit of stuff, but it wasn't something that I was really into. But then when you've got the opportunity to do something, the first one doing it, or it's new, it's cool, it's hip, it's interesting, the younger generation actually gets into it from ag and from woodworking. And so we see a lot of people that call in and say, hey, I'm buying some wood for my grandson for Christmas. He showed me your HempWood ad online, or showed me your website, and a grandfather's buying it for his grandson, and they're going to sit in the wood shop together and make a shelf for his mom or something like that. So it's kind of making that generational thing from tobacco farming to hemp farming, from the old school woodworking to the newer generation of it.
Why, for you, like, why hemp? Like, I know you have a background in bamboo and flooring. Is it environmental for you, or is it just strictly business for you? Like, what's driving you to stay in hemp?
So, honestly, if I knew how hard and problematic and much of a landfill that hemp was going to be, I probably could have found something easier to do with my time to make a living. Doing something positive with what God gave you is what you're supposed to do. And so having a positive element to what you're working on makes the hard work worthwhile. And so the environment is what I'm really after. I love being outdoors. I love camping, hiking, bow hunting, those type of things. And so in seeing that there's an opportunity to stop clear-cutting old-growth forest by replacing it with something that's actually made in America and has the eco-friendly element to it, that's the main draw. Not as much hemp as much as you can put a replacement for cutting down a 100-year-old tree that then all of a sudden has the biosphere of all of the animals like the squirrels and the bugs and the deer and everything that go after it. We're a direct replacement for white oak. And white oak has all of these different elements of the environment that depend on it. But it's the most sought after domestic wood that there is. So if you can replace that, maybe there'll be some more trees to hang a tree stand on. With the glue, a big push is to not have formaldehyde in the glue. Because I've worked in formaldehyde factories for more than 10 years of my life, and I probably will die early from that. And so not having that in one that I get to make all the calls, call the shots on, it's a lot easier to do it with formaldehyde. Cheaper. It has a lot longer lifespan, so you can add glue and then press the block a month later, and it's fine because it's based off of oil. But it has this little thing called VOCs. And VOCs creep into the air, you breathe it in, and then all of a sudden you get sick from it. So the biggest scientific achievement of HempWood is not the hemp. It's actually the glue. And Professor Miller and the chemistry department here have taken an almost impossible task to get it to work. And it's not completely there, but I'd say it's 85-90% of the way to where it will eventually be in the long run. And not having formaldehyde and not having all of the dirty elements that go in building materials is as important as being a regenerative crop, or as important as being made in America, is not having VOCs in there.
That's awesome. How many employees do you have, and how many employees could you have? You know, like once you ramp up to full capacity, what would that look like?
Well, we get this question all the time, and so ramping up and doing larger scale is just a lot more work. It's not as easy as it sounds. We currently have 21 employees, and with having 21 employees, we have a second facility downtown that has 3 to 4 employees every day. And then here we have in the office 3 people. On the factory floor operators, we have 12. We have a few interns and a plant manager. So short answer is anywhere between 20 and 24, depending on how much we're producing and how many people are interns as compared to employees.
Okay. Is this a business that you would start in other areas of the country, or
yes,
could other people do what you're doing? Like,
absolutely.
I'm not sure what I'm asking.
That's the whole plan.
Yeah.
So locally grown, locally made, locally sold is the entire idea. Made in America doesn't allow for 3-step distribution. That's outsourcing to China, Vietnam, those places. So if you can't have a distributor who sells to a retailer who sells to the customer, because then only 30 cents on the dollar goes to the manufacturer, that doesn't work made in America, then you have to have your manufacturer being your distributor as well, which makes it a regional business. So the idea is to have 4 of these set up across the U.S. in the form of franchises. 1 on the West Coast, 1 in the Northeast, headquarters here in Kentucky, and then the 4th one will probably end up being with your friends up at I&D Hemp or somewhere in Montana,
okay,
because the raw material is plentiful.
Yeah.
And so if you want to get into box shops and things like that where you have a lower cost material, then you need to do it at a centralized location that has all of the raw material right there. That way it would make it just more of a bulk play.
Okay.
So yeah, setting it up in those different regions means that you can touch your local areas for both lead points, because if you're within 500 miles of the building project, you get additional green building points, which we get 4 points for being a renewable flooring out of a score of 100. So it does help for your commercial builds. It also cuts down on lead times and shipping costs. So it actually has to be regionalized in order for it to work in the U.S.
Right. What's the time frame that you see? Like, when will we see those franchises operational?
Well, June 1st, we just opened our second facility. So having 2 of them open in 3 years is a decent track record. The guys in Oregon were supposed to come on board. They haven't really put together their whole business plan and funding of it yet. The paperwork's sitting on their desk. Pennsylvania is scheduled for next year, but time will tell. That's with Don Services out in the Pittsburgh area.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that, because
Yep.
you've done some flooring
Yes.
for their Project PA Hemp Home,
Yes.
which is actually the very last stop on this national hemp tour.
Oh,
So
sweet.
it's sort of fitting that our first stop is here and our last stop is there. So yeah, they're doing some neat stuff.
Yep. So we've identified them as kind of the best of breed, or what would be an ideal partner in those areas. Details still have to get worked out, but you got Oregon, you got Pennsylvania, which were in our initial business plans for 6 years ago.
Right. Cool. Yeah, Pennsylvania, like the ag department is very hemp friendly. There's a lot of like camaraderie among the hemp industry. It's like it's a good group of people who are trying to make that industry happen in Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really happy to hear that you're looking at our state for that.
Oh, absolutely. The soil's right. So I'm a big Civil War buff. I love like looking and reading, and I mean living here.
Yeah.
My wife thinks it's crazy. She's from China. She doesn't really completely understand the idea of the Civil War, as well as me going to see all the battlefields around here. But this area had the Battle of the Hemp Bales, which was actually used. There were hemp bales. It was Missouri, and I think they did the same thing again near the Lexington area. But they used hemp bales to hide behind because they were strong enough to stop artillery and musket fire. And so when I started really looking into Kentucky for hemp production, one of the first things I remembered was, oh yeah, a bunch of hemp grew in that area, and there was the Battle of the Hemp Bales. And just listening to a podcast. At the same time, if you look at Pennsylvania, when the South was actually invading the North, and Lee took his charge up into Gettysburg, part of the original plan was Pennsylvania is considered the land of milk and honey because of the soil and because of the climate. And they were going to live a certain percentage off of the land rather than having to drag all their rations with them, which tells you historically, if hemp grew in Kentucky, once the regulations are back to normal, then it's going to grow here again. Then it's going to tell you that if people called Pennsylvania the land of milk and honey 150, 200 years ago, then that means that it's got the right climate in the Northeast area that is a big market.
Yeah.
If you want to be next to your market,
there you go.
pick the best soil and climate that's close enough to it.
Yeah. There's stories of George Washington traveling from Philadelphia out to the fields of Lancaster County where they grew the best, like linen hemp out there. So yeah, I mean, we've got towns, hemp field, and all sorts of different.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I grew up in Maryland, and actually the church I got married in, it was a Church of England church. It was started in like 1620, 1640, something like that. And they collected the taxes for the crown at the church that I got married at. That was only 5 miles from where I lived, and 20% of the taxes were paid for a certain period in hemp. 60% tobacco, 20% timber, 20% hemp, and they collected them at the church. And so it was actually a church that the guy who wrote the story about, it actually was not a true story, about George Washington with the cherry tree. Yeah, he was actually the rector in our church.
That's funny. So what else should I ask you? What should folks know about HempWood?
What HempWood needs is a broader market acceptance. It needs to move out of just being the cousin of cannabis into being an American-made green building material that has no added formaldehyde. Because if people are willing to go to Whole Foods to buy things that are better to put into their body, they should be willing to go to specialty building materials companies to buy things that are better for putting in their house because they're breathing that in. Most of your plywoods that come in from overseas, and I would say virtually almost all plywoods that come in from overseas, as well as MDF and all those different things, they have either formaldehydes or isocyanates. And if anyone learned anything from lead paint or asbestos, formaldehyde's right there. Yeah. And that's going to be the next thing that everybody looks at and says, if people quit smoking for the most part, but they're still having these elevated cancer levels, where's that coming from? And a strong answer is going to be petroleum-based plastics and adhesives. And there's good ones and there's bad ones. And the bad ones are usually cheaper and stronger. And so people are going to have to consciously make a decision that do you want something where you know what's in it and where it came from, or do you just want to pay the lowest price for something that came overseas and that you don't know who made what except for some guy in New York City took a 30% clip of bringing it in the country.
Right. Yeah. That's what we need. I like what you're doing, Greg. I'm really proud to have this chance to talk to you.
Yeah, well,
I think you're a pioneer.
We always have to make sure the first man out of the foxhole doesn't get the bullet in the head. And we spend as much time, or at least I do here, I'll spend 40 to 50 hours a week trying to advance the business, and I'll spend 40 to 50 hours a week trying to make sure we don't go out of business. And so that encompasses the daily sprinting a marathon, which is every single day is 6 a.m. till 10 p.m. How do you grow the business and not go out of business? And so Tommy, you see over here coming in on a holiday, he was our first intern, and within 2 or 3 years he's gone from intern to manager. And you've got Dr. Brannon, who's the whole reason that we are here in Murray, Kentucky.
He's sitting right behind me.
Oh, yeah. So he can elaborate a little bit more on that, but everybody else said I was crazy, and he said, yeah, come on down. Let's see what happens. See what we can do.
All right. Well, Greg, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
All right, so that was Greg Wilson from HempWood. And in the room with us while we were recording was Dr. Tony Brannon. They call him the Dean of Hemp down here in Kentucky. And you'll hear in this interview that he's played a pivotal role in the development of agricultural hemp here in Kentucky. Dr. Tony Brannon, welcome to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast.
Welcome to Murray, Kentucky.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. We're still here at HempWood, but you are intrinsically involved, it turns out.
One of our many, many partners, but one of our best ones. Murray State University is fortunate to be involved as a regional university, and we want to serve our region, and Greg is certainly an important member of our region, particularly as it connects the dots on hemp and HempWood.
All right. Well, you're known as the Dean of Hemp.
Maybe among many things, known as the Dean of Hemp. So, and I accept that title gratefully because, Kentucky has a long history in hemp. If you go back to the 1940s, Kentucky was the national leader in hemp. And then, of course, we went through the illegal stage, and we had a congressman a commissioner then, James Comer, that staked his future on hemp and really brought it to the attention of our state. The state of Kentucky actually passed House Bill 50 well before it was legal, and just in case it would become legal. And then Senator McConnell and his leadership and through the behind-the-scenes work of the 2014 Farm Bill, he got an inclusion in there to make pilot programs in hemp legal. Commissioner Comer had been very upfront with me, and he said, Tony, if you want to help us, you can grow hemp if it comes legal. And I said, sure, Commissioner, whatever you want us to do, we'll do. And actually, the media story is quite interesting. Commissioner Comer came to Murray, to the Rotary Club, and he told them, he said, if hemp becomes legal, Murray State may be one of the first ones to work with hemp. And so the local reporter, John Wright, with the Murray Ledger and Times, started calling me and saying, Dr. Brannon, are you going to grow hemp? Well, I knew what was going to happen, so I wouldn't talk to him. And I kept putting him off, and I kept putting him off. And finally, he called me one day about tobacco, and he said, Dr. Brannon, you're having this dark tobacco field day, and that's another cornerstone foundational crop of our state. Our state was actually founded on hemp and tobacco, and we've been in the center of the dark fire tobacco region. So I talked to him about dark tobacco, and at the end of it, he wore me down. He said, well, what about hemp? And I said, look, John, if hemp ever becomes legal and we have a chance to serve our region and it's another tool in the toolbox for our farmers, of course we'll look at it. Well, the headlines in the paper the next day was not about dark tobacco. It was Dean of Agriculture Tony Brannon says Murray State will grow hemp. It was picked up by the San Francisco Chronicle, the Miami Herald, by 3 TV stations in Kentucky, and media literally all across the country, just because of the novelty of reinventing agricultural hemp. So that's how the Dean of Hemp came around, is we pledged to be involved in it. And then when it passed, I'll always remember where I was at. And Commissioner Comer called me and said, Tony, it's just become legal. I've got you some seeds hooked up with Caudill seed, and I want you to plant it. And I said, yes, sir. I hung up the phone, and I started Googling hemp growing, because we had no idea, and neither did anybody else. But fortunately, our seeds came through customs in Louisville, Kentucky, came across country from California, a French variety, Futura 75, and it arrived at the Kentucky Department of Agriculture on a Friday, and they called me and said, you can pick these seeds up, and I sent a graduate student to Frankfort on Sunday, and the truck actually broke down. I had to send another graduate student to pick the other graduate student out, and they took the back roads through Kentucky back to Murray, Kentucky, and got it here by 5 o'clock that afternoon. By 7 o'clock, we had planted 5 acres of hemp. We were ready. So that was May 12th, 2014, and it was the first legally planted hemp in the United States of America under the pilot program of the U.S. Farm Bill. And we're proud of that. We've been growing it ever since. He called me later that night, and he said, Tony, you might want to hold off on those seeds because the customs has just confiscated all the rest of the seeds at the Louisville airport. Unbeknownst to me, Customs' second largest operation in the United States, because the UPS hub is in Louisville, Kentucky. So he had to take the federal government, the DEA, to court to get those seeds released. But I told him, I said, Commissioner, if they want our seeds, they're going to have to come get them out of the ground one seed at a time because they're already in there. He said, just don't tell anybody. So we didn't tell anybody for a little while, and then it started growing, and we couldn't keep it a secret. So it really grew well that first year. We had a successful year, and it was a fiber variety, and then our phone started ringing off the wall. And Greg just asked me, so what made you think that we were going to make it? And I said, because you called back the second time. We had a lot of people that had get-rich-quick schemes that called us and wanted to partner with the university, and you never hear from them again. But Greg was very persistent, and at that time, in the second, third, and fourth year, we had begun to work on some different things with chemicals, with other things. We didn't know the seeding rates, the seeding. We didn't know how it grew, and so we actually started doing some research and some education programs. And then we were ready to hit the ground running when it became legally in the 2018 Farm Bill. After it passed, and then in the spring of 2019, we had so many calls, and I guess our forte is connecting the dots. And this factory that you're at today is a good example of connecting the dots. And so we wanted to create a center, to create a hub. So we created the Center for Agricultural Hemp at Murray State, which brings in a lot of partners. Anybody wanting to work with us can join that center and can have sponsored research or sponsored development, or we'll throw our resources from chemistry to agriculture to physics to whatever area, to graduate student work to interns, to work with those companies and help and develop their operations. And it's been a long ride. It's been a bumpy ride. It's been a ride filled with small successes and pretty huge failures. But what new crop isn't? And I look at it, I grew up, I was born in 1959, and one of the first crops I remember on our farm was soybeans. But we weren't growing soybeans for seed. We were growing soybeans for hay. And the reason that we were growing them for hay was a forage crop to feed the livestock, and we were baling it. And we didn't even know anything about harvesting seeds, and neither did anybody else. And then it became known that the soybean seed was a great livestock feed. And then the chemical companies went together on chemicals that started working on soybeans, Massagran and Blazer, and some of those I remember finally beginning to grow that. The machinery companies did self-propelled combines. And then soybeans took off. And look, after 70 years of 60, 70 years of development, where the soybean crop is at now. It just didn't start all of a sudden. It grew. It grew from meager beginnings with, I'm sure, some small successes and a lot of large failures. And that's what I look at the hemp industry. Certainly, we've had our ups and downs. When we made our first T-shirt, when we planted that first crop, it had the top 5 uses of hemp on the back of the T-shirt, and CBD was not even on there. It appeared out of nowhere, and obviously the boom came with that. A lot of the hype came with CBD. Some of the successes came with CBD, but a lot of the failures came with CBD. And we learned how not to grow an industry. And we're very, very excited about working with the grain and the fiber part of hemp. And that's become kind of our day-to-day routine. When we talk about the center of the hemp, Center for Agriculture Hemp at Murray State, that's nothing more than me and Dr. Parr and our Director of Research, Mallory Snyder. But we connect a lot of dots. We've got a lot of people in government, industry, education, business that we can connect together to help grow a business like what Greg has.
What are some of the other interesting projects that are coming out of Murray State's hemp program?
Well, we've worked with several different firms. We're working with an irrigation project now of actually growing and irrigating some hemp. We've worked with some soil amendments. We've worked in some development stage with some bioplastics. We've worked with some packaging companies in trying to give them some of the hemp that we've grown on our farm that they've turned into packaging products. And some of these companies are local and some of them are national. And they're all connecting through us to try to do some research. Our chemist is working with some of these companies. We've seen a few grants come available. And we're really, really proud of the effort that we put together with a a March submission, April 1 submission of a $10 million federal USDA Sustainable Ag Systems grant. And we're excitedly looking forward to possibly hearing back a positive word on that sometime in the fall. And that's got some 14 partners all across the country. We've had some really, really success in feeding hemp to livestock. It's not legal. You can't feed hemp to livestock. Why? Because there's no research. Somebody told me once, I asked the question, I said, so why can you go to Kroger and buy hemp hearts and put on your salad for humans, but we can't feed it to swine or poultry? And they said, well, it's two premises. One is humans are smart enough to know what to put in their body. And premise number two, animals are not. And I said, well, I don't know about premise number two, but your premise number one is totally wrong, because people don't know what to put in their body and sometimes can't figure it out. But which come first, the chicken or the egg? Which come first, the poultry-fed hemp seed or the poultry-fed soybean meal? We have research that says that poultry-fed hemp hearts and hemp supplements, the omega-3s and the omega-6s are significantly higher. A healthier meat and a healthier egg. What would that mean? Again, we've got to get it. We've got to get it. We've got to get it approved. I mean, I've been to Australia, and to find a regular egg, you got to look on the bottom shelf, and it's down there. And from shelf 2 to shelf 8 are all these specialty eggs that's got different ingredients. That's got organic or whatever agreements, or it's value added. And as you go higher up those shelves, the cost goes up. And people don't look at the bottom shelf anymore. They look at those top shelves. We're trying to get to the top shelf with that. So we have a partner with the Hemp Feed Coalition. We have a partner with Victory Hemp. And I think you're going there with their grain, their grain operation. And Chad has been a good partner. We look forward to working with them a little bit more. We've got Greg, obviously, is a partner. We're partnered with Florida Gulf Coast University because they have a hempcrete expert there. Okay. We're partnering with the Hemp Roundtable and got some data management folks with that. And then we're doing some economic studies as part of that. So that could really open the doors wide open. And I said we're trying to build a superhighway of grain and fiber hemp. Now, unfortunately, there's already a toll road on the CBD hemp, and many people have paid that toll. And we're not trying to impact that. It may have some crossover. We've got the largest free-range chicken producer in the United States is going to be one of our partners. We're looking at various, and we still got the door open for other partners. But this would really be a game changer in creating the superhighway.
And a game changer for farmers too, right?
Yeah. We want farmers. Farmers are at the center of that.
Yeah.
And Greg, from the very beginning, he said, Dr. Brannon, what will they grow this hemp for? I said, well, you're going to have to compete with corn and soybeans. And now we're not competing with $3 corn and $6 soybeans. We're competing with $6 corn and $14 soybeans. So obviously, growing the hemp is going to have to provide some money. But farmers around here are used to specialty crops, and we proved it. We proved it. I said, if you show me a profit, and if you let them figure it out, in 3 years we'll be overproducing it. Well, we did it in one. But now we got back to stable. They've got several farmers contracted, and the model is still open to be developed on what the fiber hemp is going to support and at what value. When you look at it, the Kentucky economics, the UK economic study says you lose about $50 an acre growing fiber hemp. Well, nobody do that. Well, the farmer won't do that for 1 year because there are other crops they can make money off of. So we got to figure it out. We got to figure it out how the producers and the processors can make money, but how the farmers can make money. And we had a lot of farmers that invested and looked at opportunities. And particularly those dark tobacco areas, dark tobacco production has been scaled back some. We've lost some market share. We've lost some farmers have lost some source of incomes, and they're really looking for another tool in the toolbox. Hemp's not the total answer. We've never said that. It is a component that can be part of a farm operation. Appears to be very good for the soil. Don't believe some of the information that you hear. I went to one conference and was on the panel, and I thought everything went extremely well until the moderator got up at the end and he said, I really believe hemp is the answer to everything because it is pest free and it grows on poor soils with no fertilizer. And I wanted to stand up and say, bull crap, because it don't. It don't. This is like any other agricultural crop. It takes fertilization, it takes good soil, or it grows better on good soils. There's some effort of looking at the climate change and at the carbon sequestration, and certainly in your area, one of our partners that I didn't mention is the Rodale Institute.
Yep.
And we're looking at some organic production with Kentucky State and some regular production with UK and with AgriCenter International in Memphis. So the agronomy component is very, very, very center of that, and the farming component.
Yeah. Actually, the first stand of hemp I saw was at the Rodale Institute in 2017. They were one of the first, 14 permit holders in Pennsylvania.
Got a long history on there, and
Yep.
we had interesting conversation with their management and their research director, and look forward to working with them even closer because they've done an excellent job. I've
Yep.
looked at some of their
Yep.
their research, and we actually had a communication with one of their researchers at Rodale who actually ended up on staff at UK, left there and went to UK to work with their hemp program. So it's a small world in hemp. There's not very many researchers working on it. We hope to expand that.
Was that Tara?
It was.
I've interviewed her on this podcast before.
Yep.
Yeah, a couple
Yep.
years ago. Yeah.
Yep. Sure.
Yeah,
was.
she's sharp.
You're right.
She knows what she's
Right.
doing.
Right.
How about the academic program itself at Murray? Like if there's listeners who, want to get into, learning about
Sure.
the agronomics of hemp, they could
Sure.
come here, right?
We have actually kind of got a logo type thing that we've developed, and it's education, research, development, and marketing. And that's what the Center for Hemp is. So the educational component, number one, is we have an outstanding Hudson School of Agriculture. We have about 1,175 students here. That's up from 275 when I came here 33 years ago. So we've got every different academic program that you can name in agriculture. A comprehensive regional university here to serve our region. I use my son as an example. My son went through the agribusiness crop production program, and he was on the job market. He actually was selected as outstanding senior at Murray State, and he was on the job market, and he went to work for a local Syngenta firm that's located, a global company right here in Murray, Kentucky, through Ag Connections, through their digital ag platform. He just actually started the job working with them on January the 2nd, and a gentleman called me and wanted to hire him on the 3rd in the hemp industry. And so I thought, well, too bad, he's already gone to work. But I kind of text my son and I said, hey, somebody called me today wanting to hire you. And he said, who was it? And I said, well, he was in the hemp industry. And he texted back immediately and he said, oh, I don't know about the hemp industry. And then the next text, I just left it alone. The next text was, what were they willing to pay? He'd been on the job one day. That proved to me there's a lack of knowledge about hemp because of his hesitancy, and we find a lot of hesitancies of young people. And then the two things is there money to be made there? So we're trying to kind of gently walk through that door. We offered a hemp class for the first time. Valerie Snyder, our research education coordinator, taught it online. And we've incorporated research on our farm. We've gotten students out to do it. We've invited hemp companies to come into our career fair to start talking about what's in it for agriculture, the agricultural standpoint. Now, I'm going to admit to you, we've had people that are interested in hemp that have come over for some other things that have been interested in it in a different angle. And that's from maybe some impact from its illegal cousin, or at least illegal in Kentucky anyway. And that, as we talked about before, we got to kind of, hemp stands on its own. And to me, it's an agricultural crop, and I don't see the other one as ever being an agricultural crop, but it's certainly going to be something different. But we want to try to educate students about it and give them some experience in it so that they'll be marketable, so that they can be an intern for Greg, so that they can do like Tommy and put all this farming acreage together and be able to talk knowledgeable to farmers.
Cool. Well,
and maybe take it back to their home farm. We've got some that go back to their home farm, and I don't want to ever overlook that, because sometimes that's overlooked. We've been a leader in dark tobacco production. We got people now, farmers that are growing tobacco that was developed right on our farm. We got people that are doing mass grazing mob grazing of grass for their livestock that they saw right on Murray State, that they've taken it back to their farm. So we want to, for those few that go back to the farm, we want to make sure they have that opportunity too.
Nice. All comes back to the farm.
It's where it starts, it's where it ends.
Dr. Tony Brannon, thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
My pleasure.
Also in the room with us was Tommy Copeland. He's a recent graduate of Murray State University, and he used to be an intern at HempWood, but has since become the operations manager there. So I figured we should talk to him, since he's the guy who deals with all of the farmers and all that stuff. So let's talk to Tommy. Tommy Copeland,
That's me.
operations manager here at HempWood.
Yeah.
What do you do? What's your deal?
So I handle all parts of the process of turning fiber hemp stalks into a hardwood. So from contracting farmers and bringing in raw material to ordering ingredients, the glue, bringing all that in, making sure that the glue area is functioning properly, the press area, the people working there are doing their jobs, and then making sure that we're getting a quality product out the door. So I just kind of oversee and make sure that it all happens.
Okay. Let's talk about how you work with farmers. What do you do? Do you have some contracted, or do people just call you up and they want to deliver hemp?
A little bit of both.
Yeah.
So what plan A is, we contract with people, and it depends on whether they want to do a dedicated crop or they're doing a grain variety, and we can just buy the fiber from that. That's ideal, because then it's like we're buying wheat straw instead of having to compete with corn or soybeans. Mm-hmm. But past 2 years, we haven't had a whole lot of that. 2019, we had a guy a couple counties west of here that did a whole bunch, and that raw materials lasted us for a good while. But we've contracted a couple hundred acres the past 2 years for a dedicated crop, and so basically it's a mix. I just kind of looked at an ADM futures contract and kind of based it off that. But it's say they want to grow 10 acres. We'll say, all right, we'll buy what you grow on the 10 acres. I'll try to be out there every week, every other week, something like that, to just keep my eyes on it, make sure we're on the same page there. Mm-hmm. And then as long as there's not a bunch of foreign material in there and it's a product we can use, we'll buy it.
So you could make hemp wood out of any type of stalk? Hemp stalk?
We've tried some CBD stuff. We tried it again. We haven't cut it yet to get our test results back, but just from the process of it, it's not looking too optimistic. So grain and fiber varieties, so just the stuff that's traditionally been grown in the U.S., not the CBD varieties. Right.
What's your background? What'd you go to school for?
I grew up in Indiana on a hog and row crop farm. So then I wanted to come to a school that wasn't too big but wasn't too small. Purdue was a little too big for me. That's the big ag school in my area up there. So some way found Murray State, came down here, took a visit, loved it. Mom loved it, so this is where I went. And I started here as an intern in 2019, and it was a pole barn with 2 holes in the ground, and it just kind of happened at the last second. I was like, well, pig barns for another summer, or do I try something else? And it's kind of stuck, so I'm still here.
What do your folks think about hemp?
Well, my grandparents, talking to them right off the bat, they were real curious, and it was like, all right, I calmed them down with, it's stuff they used to grow for rope. That's what I'm dealing with. So explaining that, kind of explaining that it's wood, now they're all behind it. My dad, every couple months, comes down and buys stuff and making all kinds of stuff. He made me a coffee table as a graduation present, and he's making his buddies all kinds of tables and stuff now because they see it and they want it. So they've actually been really, really supportive of it.
Good. So I'm guessing you're considerably younger than me. You're of a different generation.
Yeah.
How do we reach that generation and get them, one, to stop conflating hemp with marijuana, and two, like how do you get people like demanding that their products have, more purpose to them? They're not just cheap crap from China. How do we talk to your generation?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think there's from my experience, there's a lot that my eyes were opened up to working here. I mean, I didn't know squat about wood when I came here, and I've kind of learned there's differences between everything and the way everything's made, and I didn't really realize how much petroleum went into everything, whether it's plastic and everything like that, and how much cheaper it is. And so I think just educate. I don't know the best way to go about it, but just getting the information out on what's what, and not necessarily telling them what to believe, but just giving them the facts on, this is cheaper, but this is why it's cheaper. Things like that.
Right. Okay. What kind of questions do you get from farmers?
Usually if we can buy their CBD stalks. It's the most common one. Answer is no. But about how we want it planted, how growing season, things like that. So here in Kentucky, we're looking late April, early May. Was when we want it planted. If it's just a fiber crop and not a grain crop, we're looking at a late July, early August to mid-August to cut it. You want your row spacing as tight as possible. You can broadcast it or you can drill it. I prefer drilling it, but
why is that?
When you broadcast it, you don't have as even disbursement. So it's not as uniform. Just comparing field to field, from what I've seen, drilling it works better. But we're still trying to figure out a lot of questions with genetics, and there's a lot of questions they ask that we don't know the answer to. So there's a lot to figure out. Right now, we kind of tell them if it's their first or second year growing, we try to keep it below 20 acres is what we want them doing, because we don't want somebody going all out and then it not going well.
Right.
Because something's going to mess up. Something's going to happen. So don't bet the farm on it if you've never done it before.
Are you finding that these guys have the equipment they need to harvest it?
For the most part, baling equipment is the biggest thing. A sickle bar mower, typically most people don't have that, but they're relatively easy to find or borrow. Yeah. So anything with an axis, it's just going to get wrapped up, and you're going to bring a blowtorch out to the field and cut it off. So you just want something with a back and forth motion to cut it and not a wrapping, because it will wrap. From there, if I can find people that are already doing row crops and are already doing some hay, that's kind of the ideal farmer I want to work with, because they've already got all the equipment.
Are you actively seeking farmers? Like, do you go out and sort of cold call farms?
I wouldn't say cold call, but we'll put something out with the Kentucky Department of Agriculture every couple months. I'm always asking, hey, if somebody wants to grow, call me. We'll figure something out. We're definitely actively looking for farmers. We aren't incredibly aggressive with going out and seeking them, just because we don't want to try to overpromise anything. So if something goes wrong, we don't want to be the reason that it did.
Fair enough. This might be a question for Greg, but maybe you can answer it. Could you use these boards for like siding or any kind of
indoor use?
Yeah.
So you can do like an accent wall, something like that. I would not put it outside. It's for interior use.
Okay.
Just like any hardwood.
Right. All right. Anything else you want to tell me or our listeners?
So like going back to how I talked about how the first couple of years when we work with a farmer, we want them only doing a couple acres, because we want them to have a good base before they scale up. We want to build it the right way instead of the quick way. So we're kind of doing that here as we build out the facility too. We've taken some extra steps, like adding the bioburner to help eliminate some of our waste and bring our carbon footprint down. There's a lot of numbers floating out about how much carbon hemp takes out of the air and everything like that. I don't know the exact numbers, but there's obviously a lot more research that needs to be done, but there's a lot of data on the U.S. corn crop that pulls out a lot of carbon every year. I imagine hemp is also going to be in the same train. It's pulling out the bad stuff, and we can contribute a tangible good while pulling out some of the bad stuff. And like I said, we've built it the right way and not the quick way. So using the soy-based adhesives instead of the phenol formaldehyde is a lot harder, a lot less lucrative, but it's the right thing to do. Using the bioburner instead of just burning a bunch of propane. It's harder, more expensive, but it's the right thing to do. So we've kind of taken that approach on a lot of things. It's more work, it's maybe a little less lucrative, but it's the right thing to do.
And that seems like a paradigm shift in like an approach to business.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no, it's there's definitely a lot of that. Somebody sent me something. Jamie Dimon Chase was talking about environmental investing and stuff like that, and J.P. Morgan's call, whatever, a couple weeks ago. So there's definitely been a big shift in that, and I think a lot of the money backing business is starting to see that shift as well.
Good. I think we could stand to live in a world where people and planet come before the profits, right?
Yeah. You got to do what you got to do, but we gotta live here as well.
It's the only place we have.
Yeah. There needs to be a balance.
Cool. Well, Tommy Copeland, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I'll let you get back to work on your holiday. He's paying you double time on holiday, right?
I wish.
He's on Saturday.
And so after these interviews at HempWood, we took a drive over to Murray State University's Agricultural Center, not too far away. Great, big, beautiful working research farm. They're doing, research on corn and soy and tobacco and, of course, hemp. I shot some video there with Tony and Tommy, and I will post those at LancasterFarming.com for the show page for this episode. So thanks for listening to our show today. Things are starting to get a little noisy here at the campground. Leaf blowers and generators and whatnot. But I'm going to be publishing another episode real soon. This will be my conversation with Chad Rosen from Victory Hemp up in Carrollton, Kentucky. I talked to him yesterday. And that's a good interview too. So keep your eyes open for that. And otherwise, thanks for listening. My name is Eric Harlock. I am on the road with the Lancaster Farming National Hemp Tour right now. From Kentucky, we're headed through the Midwest. We're going to get to South Bend Industrial Hemp by Friday, July 9th, where they are having an open house. I'm looking forward to that. But we do have some driving ahead of us. And, all right, until next time, I'll see you on the road. This episode of the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast National Hemp Tour is copyright 2021 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, part of the Steinman Communications family. Today's show was written and recorded, edited, and produced by Eric Harlock. Any music you hear throughout the show is courtesy of Tin Bird Shadow.